Just to give you some perspective of where we're talking about, again, the Stanislaus County and the Kings County, that is California. California has about 800 miles length, so it's pretty long state. The two premises were probably about 180 kilometers away from each other, and I'll discuss that a little bit more later. But again, you can see where we are, and when you see the pathway for the wildlife, you're going to see why we have the issues. So again, this response is a cooperative agreement between USDA and CDFA. Essentially, first we detect the disease, and I'll talk about how that happened, how we contain it. Again, as was mentioned prior to it, the faster that you respond, the better you can control the incident. And again, also how we handle the eradication of the population. And then some of the surveillance that we have done, not only in the contact zone, but also in the contact area, control area, but also in the surveillance area. And some of the things that we have done for outreach and education, again, the disposal, composting, C&D, and then the repopulation, which again, that hasn't taken place yet. 21st January, our commercial facilities are really good as far as doing surveillance. And one of the practitioners kind of noted some high mortality. They took the samples to our laboratory in Davis, and then the following days they came out with a matrix positive for AI. They were submitted to NBSL, and then immediately we quarantined the facility. Again, the state veterinarian has the ability to quarantine not only premises but also areas. The particular avian influenza, actually, it's important to know that it's the same than the one that was diagnosed in Washington for the falcon that was out there. Again, it was at H5N8. As I mentioned, the infected premises, the IP, immediately was quarantined. We set up an incident command post with the USDA and CDFA. Dr. Miller also had the opportunity to come and kind of see that, and if you have any comments, I'll be happy to maybe, if you can make some of those. We immediately had, again, by the USDA guidelines, a 3-kilometer infected zone was established from the IP, a 7 kilometers buffer zone, which gave us the control area, and then we established a 10 to 20 surveillance zone from the IP. The IP was populated with USDA, CDA personnel. We have the Office of Emergency Services, the Department of Public Health, pest regulations, and law enforcement. And the reason that we have law enforcement, I think one of the things that we wanted to do is that surveillance component sometimes can be a little bit on the difficult side, because some of the areas where we have to actually go door to door sometimes are not very safe. The central, yes?
What's the difference in the infected zone and the buffer zone? Is that surveillance differences?
The distance. The infected zone is 3 kilometers, and then from there to 10 kilometers, that's the buffer zone, and those two make the control area.
But what's the difference in being in the what's the effect of being in the infected zone?
I think there's a lot more movement control. The IC has the ability to limit what moves in and out within those particular areas. So you have a lot more restrictions on what you can do as far as moving products, moving vehicles, and so forth in the infected area. And if USDA, there's anybody here that can maybe add to that? Again, the incident command system is, I'm not going to go through this slide, but again, we have different sections. The operation section usually is in the field doing work. The planning is usually doing the epidemiology. Then we have the logistics doing helping you purchase and facilitate some of the movements. And then the finance, obviously, to keep track of the cost. Again, the quarantine was established by the state veterinarian under the California Agriculture Code. We set up a permit system based on our information system in California. We use what we call a very similar to a 127 for USDA. It's actually a permit to move not only the animals, but also products. It's a brand new system that we have developed for the iPad application, and it can be used both on online and offline. And one of the things that we're trying to do with that app is actually look at the secure food supply, where in our system we keep log of the status of a particular facility. So if a particular facility is in the control area and it's an infected or it's a monitored premises, then we enter that information in an information system, and that information is downloaded into the app. We then know the status of that particular facility. If it changes, and again, once you sync again with the iPad, that information will be changed. And if anybody's interested in looking at that, I'll be happy to give you a demo later on. One of the things that we immediately, again, it's a commercial facility, was the first one in the U.S., and with the press, you never know what's going to happen as far as the facility. So we established a private security company to maintain security of the premises 24/7 during the population process as well as the composting process. A reminder that really when you respond to an incident, the first priority that you have to have is the health and safety of responders. When you have an avian influenza early on, you don't know what kind of a strain it is. So you have to really make sure that the biosecurity is maintained and the proper equipment is provided to everyone in the facility. We actually had a physician come over and evaluate, get set up early on. Dr. Miller, do you have any comments about the incident command system?
Just that I was real impressed with, I think I got there about on day 3 and everything was operating smoothly already, and just very impressed with the personnel that you had in place and the qualifications of the people that you had in the different chief sections.
Yeah, and I think going back to the comments earlier, I think sometimes we get rusty because we haven't had an event happen in our state. We had one last year, a low path, and I think we're fairly fresh about what happened back then. And that really gives us the ability to very quickly actually go in and start tackling the job. A little bit more about the epidemiology of the Stanislaus County. Again, we got 3 growing houses. There were 20 houses in the complex, 143,000 turkeys. And again, this is really the worst case scenario in a sense. Although one thing that really worked in our favor, that actually that facility was fairly remote from any commercial facility. We did have 2 additional commercial premises in the control area, and again, those were placed under quarantine and testing requirements. And some of the testing that we used was for the USDA guidelines as well as the secure poultry supply. We use they have a testing protocol that tell you what you need to test, how often, and so forth. Fortunately, in this case, these 2 commercial facilities, the poultry that was in there were very young. So they were not going to be going to market until about probably 6 weeks later. So we had a lot of time to test in between before they went. There were 11 backyard premises in the quarantine area, in the control area, sorry. And then there were 23 commercial in the surveillance area. Again, that's from the 10 kilometers to 20 kilometers. Those were in the surveillance zone. There were 53 backyard in that surveillance zone, and they were sampled once. The commercial twice. And again, all the facilities, had enhanced biosecurity once they learned about the event. The one in the Kings County in the southern part, there were 7 houses. This involved 70,000 chickens and 35,000 ducks. There were 5 additional commercial premises in the control area. One of them happened to be empty at the time. That was very close to the infected facility. The company decided to maintain it empty and not populated until more was learned about the event. There were 23 backyard premises under quarantine in the control area. Again, much more populated in that area. And there were 10 commercial premises in the surveillance zone. And they were sampled again twice, and the backyard sampled once. Biosecurity again was enhanced in all poultry premises. And one thing that happened on this particular event is that particular company from one of the commercial facilities in the control area marketed to the live bird market, and once we find out that there was an infection there in the company, there were 20 traces that were to live bird markets. Those were all negative. That created a little bit of a problem because to maintain the continuity of business on this type of marketing is very difficult, because the way it works, they market to Southern California. They market to probably about 7 or 8 different facilities, live bird markets. They send one truck to all 7 of them. And somebody will pick up 50, some 25, 175, and then the other one will not get any. So you don't know exactly how many birds are leaving before they go to the facility. So present a little bit of kind of difficulty to try to keep track of that. Again, here's the distance between the 2 facilities, 180 kilometers, and then that's where you start looking at the dots. The green are commercial, and the darker are backyard facilities that we had actually from previous events. So you can see that it can sometimes get really very difficult. The one, again, on the north part of the state, that one fairly isolated. Actually, they were both fairly isolated from the other ones. The red circle, that's the control area, and the yellow one is the surveillance zone. We did look at the wildlife. Again, we suspected, again, like in other parts of the country, that there may be a wildlife component. Our Wildlife Service actually went did an inventory, and you can see some of the birds that were found. There's a lot of bodies of water. I know we have a shortness of water, but we do have water coming down from the north to the south. We do have some wildlife preserves. They happen to be near the one on the southern part. There's a wildlife preserve that has some water. So that presents that problem. Again, you can see, and I think you have seen this slide before. If you haven't, you can see on the top left where they intersect the migratory birds that come from Asia coming to the North America. And that's where we think, again, some of this H5N8 maybe came from the Asia. So again, we see how we can now start seeing some of these coming more and more. We did do extensive outreach. We have a lot of documentation that we have. I have a couple of samples if you're interested. We did go out door to door, providing information to all those backyard facilities. We also work very closely with the feed stores. We provide a lot of information to them that are a good source of providing information to people, because people go up to there to obtain their feed. Our lab system actually started doing a lot of advertising that we were doing free testing at the lab. We have done that in the past all the time, but right now they were more actively advertising that service. And again, the live markets and suppliers in California, they also participate in a program with us in biosecurity training as well as influenza testing. We have that program always ongoing. The method of population it was based on a case-by-case basis. These are some of the ones that have been suggested in the past to be used. And it happened to be that we used for the commercial facilities the foam technique. I did talk to one of the people that work on that this morning to find out how the composting is going. It's been already enough time that the compost is almost gone. The birds are almost gone, and so I think it seems to be working well. One of the key things about the compost is that what I highlighted in red is really some of the key components when you compost birds, at least from our experience. Your carbon source has to be one that has really good. They were initially trying to use rice hulls. Rice hulls have more silica, and so they decided to go with wood chips, and that actually works much better. Moisture is really important. You don't want to have a compost that is very soupy, but at the same time you want to have it moist to the touch. And again, you really need to cover that with that good carbon source. Another thing that you have to consider when you compost is the size of the birds. In one of the facilities that we have coming up, we have some birds that are very large, which I think composting is going to present a problem. So we're looking at alternatives to be able to do something different. So the C&D has an oversight by USDA, CDA personnel. Again, we have an extremely good relationship in California with both agencies. We share offices. Sometimes we have the supervisor for the state will provide work for the USDA personnel. So we have an extremely good relationship. The C&D is part of the work plan. Every facility that is quarantined has a flood plan, a very extensive flood plan. And again, they have to go through some testing before we can release them. If it's positive, again, it has to be repeated. One of the things that you may want to think about in your state, I don't know if you're like California, but we have what we call California EPA, which actually has sometimes more stringent regulation than the U.S. EPA. So you may want to make sure that the disinfectant that you're going to be using is approved by your state agency also. So again, I think the goal that we had from the beginning, from the incident, is really to contain that virus from spreading to other facilities. As Dr. Baker mentioned earlier, I think what they saw in Washington was very similar. What he said this morning is that even a facility, these are backyard facilities, one that were next to each other, actually never really went to the facility. So somehow this virus did not spread very easily. Which is good, but again, how they get there, specifically how he came into this facility is hard to tell. The possibilities are multiple.